She thought I was just a dead broke old woman clinging to my son. But when they threw me out into the rain, they had no idea that inside my worn purse, I clutched papers they'd consider worthless, documents now worth billions of dollars. My late husband's forgotten Amazon stocks from the 90s had turned me into a secret billionaire, and I decided to use every penny to show the world my daughter-in-law's true face. My name is Martha Callahan, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing in the rain, watching my own son close the door in my face. The November downpour soaked through my thin coat within seconds, but nothing chilled me more than Vanessa's words still ringing in my ears. "You're nothing but a dead broke parasite leeching off my husband. We've carried you long enough. Martha, it's time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet." I clutched my worn leather purse against my chest, the rain drumming against its surface. Inside, among tissues and old receipts, lay a manila folder I'd grabbed in my haste to leave, papers my late husband Harold had left me 25 years ago, papers Vanessa had just called worthless junk when she'd thrown them at my feet, through the living room window. I could see my son Daniel standing behind his wife, his head bowed, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Not once did he look up. Not once did he defend the woman who'd raised him alone after his father's death, who'd sacrificed everything for his happiness. "Please," I had begged just minutes earlier, my voice breaking. "This is my home too. I paid for the foundation, the kitchen renovation. I've been here 8 years. Your money?" Vanessa had laughed, that sharp, cruel sound I'd grown to dread. "What money? You haven't worked in years. Everything you've contributed came from my husband's paychecks. You've been nothing but a burden, pretending to help with the children when really you're just interfering with how I raise them." The rain intensified, and I stumbled toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. My arthritis screamed with each step, but I kept walking. Behind me stood the 2-story colonial I'd helped purchase, where I'd cooked thousands of meals, folded endless loads of laundry, and sung my grandchildren to sleep night after night. I thought about how it had started, Daniel calling me 8 years ago, voice thick with desperation. "Mom, Vanessa's pregnant again, and the medical bills from Emma's birth nearly bankrupted us. I hate to ask, but..." I'd sold my condo the next week, moved in with promises of family, of being needed, of never being alone again. For a while, it had been everything I dreamed. Vanessa had been so sweet then, bringing me tea, asking my advice about the baby, telling her friends how lucky she was to have such a wonderful mother-in-law. When had it changed? When had I gone from beloved family to unwanted burden? The bus stop offered little shelter. I sank onto the wet bench, my purse pressed against my stomach. Other passengers gave me pitying looks, just another old woman with nowhere to go. If only they knew. If only Vanessa knew what she'd just thrown away. My fingers found the edge of the manila folder through the leather. Harold's foolish investment, as his brother had called it back in 1998. Amazon? What kind of name is that for a company? You're throwing away good money on internet nonsense. But Harold had believed. "Martha," he'd said on his deathbed, "keep those papers safe. Promise me. Someday they might be worth something." I'd kept that promise for 25 years, through raising Daniel alone, through financial struggles, through the temptation to sell when things got tough. The certificates had moved with me from apartment to apartment, always safely tucked away. Even when I'd sold everything else to help Daniel, I'd kept Harold's final gift, now, sitting in the rain, cast out by the very people I'd given everything to. I finally understood why. Harold hadn't just left me stock certificates. He'd left me power. Power I didn't even know I had. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the street where my former life stood, in that big house. Vanessa was probably already planning what to do with my room. Daniel was likely convincing himself this was for the best. They thought they'd disposed of a problem. They had no idea they'd just created their worst nightmare. The bus arrived 20 minutes later, and I climbed aboard with shaking hands. As we pulled away from my old life, memories flooded back, 8 years of sacrifices that Vanessa had so easily forgotten. It started with my condo in Riverside Heights. Small but mine, paid off after 30 years of careful saving. The real estate agent had warned me. Mrs. Callahan, this is your security. Are you certain you want to sell? But Daniel's voice on the phone, broken and desperate, had made the decision for me. Emma needed surgery. Vanessa had complications requiring extended bed rest. They were drowning in debt. It's just temporary. Mom. Daniel had promised. Once we're back on our feet, we'll help you get another place. Temporary. 8 years later, I was homeless. The first months had been golden. I remember Vanessa meeting me at the door, tears streaming down her face. Martha, you're our angel. I don't know how we'll ever repay you. She'd embraced me like I was her own mother, and for a moment, I'd felt like I'd gained a daughter. I became their everything. When Vanessa returned to work 6 weeks after Emma's birth, I was the one walking the floors at 3 a.m, singing the same lullabies I'd once sung to Daniel. When little James arrived 2 years later, premature and fragile, I spent weeks in the NICU, holding his tiny hand while Vanessa and Daniel worked to pay the mounting bills. Mom's got it covered became Daniel's favorite phrase. Need someone to wait for the plumber? Mom's got it. School pickup? Mom's got it. Thanksgiving dinner for 12? Grocery shopping? Sick child? Mom. The money from my condo had gone quickly. Medical bills, the down payment on the house, 2 car repairs, Vanessa's student loans. Just a little more, Daniel would say, guilt flickering in his eyes. We're almost stable. But stable never came. Instead, my Social Security became part of their budget for household expenses, Vanessa explained, setting up the automatic transfer. Since you're living here, it's only fair you contribute. Contribute. As if the 16-hour days weren't contribution enough. As if raising their children while they pursued careers wasn't valuable. I paid for groceries, covered utility bills, bought the children's clothes. When James needed speech therapy not covered by insurance, guess whose retirement savings covered it? You're so good with money, Martha, Vanessa would say, watching me clip coupons and shop sales to stretch every dollar. I don't know how you do it. I did it by emptying my savings account, by selling my jewelry, piece by piece. My mother's pearl necklace paid for Emma's dance classes. My wedding ring, the upgrade Harold had given me for our 20th anniversary, covered the new water heater. And through it all, I smiled. I told myself this was what family did. When my friend Eleanor asked why I was wearing costume jewelry to Bridge Club, I lied. When my sister Patricia offered to lend me money, I declined. I had my pride, and I had my purpose, being needed. The shift had been gradual. Vanessa started working late, expecting me to handle dinner and bedtime alone. Weekends meant they needed couple time, leaving me with the children from Friday night through Sunday evening. The thank yous became less frequent, then disappeared entirely. Martha, you fed James too much sugar today. He was hyper all evening. Martha, Emma's teacher, says she's been tired. Haven't you been enforcing bedtime? Martha, this house is a mess. What do you do all day? What did I do? I woke at 5:30 to pack lunches, made breakfast, drove Emma to school, entertained James, cleaned, shopped, cooked, helped with homework, bathed children, read bedtime stories, then started on the laundry that never ended. But my contributions became invisible, expected, criticized when imperfect. The final straw had been last month. Vanessa's mother had visited from Florida, and I'd overheard them talking in the kitchen while I folded laundry upstairs. She's becoming such a burden, Vanessa had said, always underfoot, always inserting herself. I can't parent my own children without her hovering. You're too kind, her mother had replied. I would have put my foot down years ago. She's taking advantage of your generosity. My generosity? I'd stood frozen, a tiny sock in my hand, as the truth crashed over me. In Vanessa's mind, the story had been rewritten. She was the generous one, housing a needy old woman. I was the parasite, contributing nothing, taking everything. The bus lurched to a stop, pulling me from my memories. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. I clutched my purse tighter, feeling the outline of Harold's folder through the leather. They thought they'd discarded a burden. They had no idea what they'd really thrown away. The hotel room was cheap but clean. As I sat on the edge of the bed, still damp from the rain, I thought about how masterfully Vanessa had orchestrated my exile. It hadn't happened overnight. Like a skilled chess player, she'd moved her pieces slowly, deliberately, until I was cornered with nowhere to go. First came the subtle isolation. Martha, we appreciate everything, but children need consistency. It's confusing when you contradict my parenting decisions. Fair enough. I'd thought. I stepped back, bit my tongue when she gave the children candy before dinner or let them stay up past bedtime on school nights. Then the financial manipulation. Since you're handling the grocery shopping anyway, why don't you just pay for it directly? It's easier than transferring money back and forth. My Social Security check, meant to last a month, would vanish within 2 weeks feeding a family of 5. The emotional warfare was the cruelest. She'd started praising other grandmothers in front of me. Tyler's grandmother knows when to give his parents space. She visits once a month and stays in a hotel. That's healthy boundaries. I'd tried to create those boundaries. Suggested I eat dinner in my room sometimes, give them family time. But then Daniel would appear at my door. Mom, why aren't you joining us? Vanessa made your favorite casserole. Later, Vanessa would complain I was being antisocial, making things awkward. The children became weapons. If I disciplined them, I was overstepping. If I didn't, I was letting them run wild. When Emma started calling me mean grandma, a name I'd never heard before Vanessa's mother visited, I knew where it came from. Children pick up on tension, Vanessa had said sweetly. Maybe if you were more relaxed around them? Relaxed while managing 2 young children, a household, and walking on eggshells every waking moment. Daniel's transformation hurt the most. My son, who'd called me his hero when his father died, who'd sworn he'd always take care of me, slowly became a stranger. He stopped making eye contact, stopped asking about my day, started prefacing every interaction with Vanessa thinks. Vanessa thinks you're being too strict with James. Vanessa thinks you should get out more, make friends your own age. Vanessa thinks the kids need more space from you. When I tried talking to him alone, really talking like we used to, he'd fidget and find excuses to leave. Sorry, Mom, Vanessa needs me to... Always Vanessa. 3 weeks ago, I'd made my fatal error. Emma had fallen at school, and the nurse couldn't reach Vanessa. I'd rushed over, comforted my granddaughter, brought her home, when Vanessa arrived 2 hours later, finding us baking cookies to cheer Emma up. Her face had gone cold. You picked her up without telling me? The school called, you didn't answer. So you just decided you were her mother, made decisions about her medical care? It was a scraped knee, but the damage was done. I'd proven I was a threat to her maternal authority. The final phase began. Suddenly, nothing I did was right. The house was too cluttered, my fault for having too many belongings in my 10 by 12 room. The children were spoiled, my fault for buying them occasional treats with my grocery money. The bills were too high. Surely I was using too much electricity. Water, heat. Last week, she'd started leaving pamphlets around. Golden Years Assisted Living, affordable senior solutions. Making the transition when it's time for professional care. Social services for seniors. You're not alone. The message was clear. Get out. Yesterday had been James's birthday. I'd saved for months to buy him the robot toy he'd wanted. When I gave it to him at breakfast, Vanessa's smile was arctic. Oh, Martha, we specifically told James he needed to earn that toy with good behavior. You've undermined 3 months of parenting in one moment. That evening, while I was cleaning up after the party I'd largely organized and paid for, I heard them in their bedroom. Daniel's voice, weak and guilty. Maybe she could get a small apartment nearby. With what money, Daniel? She's broke. She spent everything on this house. Remember? Besides, do you really want her dropping by constantly, confusing the children, guilting you every time we don't include her in something? She's my mother. And I'm your wife. The children are your priority. Your mother is a grown woman who made her choices. She chose to sell her home. She chose to spend her savings. No one forced her. No one forced her. just her son's desperate calls, just her grandchildren's needs, just her belief that family meant something. This morning, Vanessa had delivered the final blow. "Martha, we need to talk about your living situation. Daniel and I think it's time you explored other options. For everyone's well-being." When I'd reminded her of everything I'd contributed, she'd laughed, actually laughed. "Contributed? You've been living rent-free for 8 years. We've housed you, fed you, included you in our family, and this is the thanks we get? Financial manipulation? Trying to guilt us into letting you stay forever?" The revision of history was complete. In her narrative, I was the villain, the burden, the user. And Daniel, my son, had stood there in silence, studying his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Now, in this hotel room, I pulled out Harold's folder with trembling hands. They'd rewritten the past, erased my sacrifices, transformed love into obligation and obligation into resentment, but they couldn't rewrite what was in this folder. They couldn't erase what Harold had left me. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly what these old papers were worth. And then I would write a new story, one where the villain doesn't win. The Charles Schwab office was intimidating with its polished marble floors and gleaming walls. I clutched Harold's folder, feeling underdressed in my yesterday's rain-wrinkled clothes. The young receptionist barely glanced up until I mentioned I needed help with some old stock certificates. "Physical certificates?" She looked puzzled. "Those are quite rare now. Let me get someone from our specialty services." Thomas Morrison, the advisor who greeted me, was kind enough not to comment on my disheveled appearance. His expression changed. However, when I opened the folder, "Mrs. Callahan, these are—" He adjusted his glasses, examining the papers carefully. "These are original Amazon stock certificates from 1998. May I ask how many shares?" 5,000, I whispered. "My husband bought them at $18 each, used our entire emergency fund. I thought he was crazy." Thomas's fingers flew over his calculator. When he looked up, his face was pale. "Mrs. Callahan, are you aware that Amazon stock has split multiple times since then? Your 5,000 shares would now be—" "Hold on, more calculating. Approximately 120,000 shares at today's count." The room spun. "What does that mean?" "At today's closing price of $3,700 per share, your holdings are worth approximately—" He showed me the calculator screen. $444 million. I must have fainted because the next thing I knew, I was on a leather couch with Thomas pressing a glass of water into my hands. "This can't be right." I kept saying, "Harold paid $90,000. That's all." "Mrs. Callahan, your husband made one of the most brilliant investment decisions I've ever seen. These certificates have been sitting here, splitting and growing for over 25 years. You're extraordinarily wealthy." Wealthy? The word felt foreign. Yesterday, I'd counted my last $47, wondering how long I could stretch it. Today, I had more money than I could comprehend. "There's more," Thomas continued gently. "The certificates show additional purchases through 1999 and 2000, another 8,000 shares. Pre-split. Did you know about these?" I shook my head, numb. Harold had been secretly investing while I worried about mortgage payments. He'd believed in something no one else could see. "I need to verify authenticity and ownership, of course," Thomas explained. "But assuming everything checks out and these look legitimate, we're talking about total holdings worth approximately $700 million. After taxes on any sales, you'd still have, more than you could spend in several lifetimes. $700 million from a dead broke parasite to 3/4 of a billionaire in one conversation. What do I do now?" My voice sounded small. "Lost," Thomas smiled. "First, we secure these certificates properly. Then, we discuss your options. You could sell some shares for immediate liquidity, keep others for continued growth. We'll need tax attorneys, financial advisors, security considerations." "Security? Mrs. Callahan, you're about to become a very wealthy woman. That requires certain precautions." The next 3 hours blurred together. Forms, signatures, authentication processes. Thomas assembled a team who treated me like royalty, a stark contrast to how I'd been treated 24 hours ago. By noon, we'd established a preliminary plan: sell $50 million worth of shares for immediate needs, keep the rest invested. "Where are you staying?" Thomas asked as we wrapped up. "We'll need a secure address for correspondence." I thought of my cheap hotel room, of Vanessa's sneering face. "I'm between residences at the moment." He didn't press. "We have relationships with several discreet real estate agents who handle high-net-worth clients. Shall I make some calls?" By 3 in the afternoon, I was viewing a furnished penthouse downtown. The realtor, Margaret, was showing me features I'd only seen in magazines: marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, a terrace overlooking the city. "It's available immediately," she said. "The owner is motivated to sell, $4.2 million, but I suspect they'd take $4 million. Yesterday. I'd worried about having enough for next week's hotel bill. "I'll take it." I heard myself say, "Cash purchase. How soon can we close?" Margaret's eyes widened. "With cash, we could close within the week." As we toured the master bedroom, bigger than my entire former room at Daniel's house, my phone buzzed. 15 missed calls from Daniel, 23 texts. I scrolled through them. "Mom, where are you?" "Vanessa didn't mean it that way. Please come back so we can talk. The kids are asking for Grandma. This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child. At least tell me you're safe. Mom, I'm sorry, please." I deleted them all without responding. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them think their dead broke burden was wandering the streets, standing on that penthouse terrace, looking out at the city where I'd scraped and saved and sacrificed. I felt something shift inside me, the humiliation of being thrown out in the rain, the years of being treated like an unpaid servant, the casual cruelty of being erased from the family I'd helped build. Vanessa had called me a parasite, said I contributed nothing, accused me of manipulation and greed. She had no idea who she'd challenged. I pulled out my phone and made a new contact. Thomas Morrison, wealth manager. Then another. Margaret Chen, real estate. Tomorrow, I'd add more. Lawyers, accountants, investigators. Because this discovery wasn't just about money. It was about truth. And I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of people Daniel and Vanessa Callahan really were. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably congratulating herself on getting rid of the dead weight. Daniel was likely convincing himself he'd done the right thing. They thought their story was over. They were wrong. Mine was just beginning. The law offices of Brennan. Hayes and Associates occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. My new attorney, Richard Brennan, was a silver-haired shark who'd come highly recommended by Thomas Morrison. "Let me understand this correctly," Richard said, reviewing the documents I'd provided. "You contributed approximately $300,000 to your son's household over 8 years, including the sale of your home, your savings, and your Social Security payments." "That's just the money I can document," I replied. "There was more? Cash payments, jewelry sold, informal loans never repaid?" He nodded, making notes. "And you have no formal agreement regarding ownership of the house or repayment?" "They're family. We're family." I trusted them. Trust doesn't hold up in court, unfortunately. However, he leaned back. "You mentioned wanting to know about their finances?" They lived well beyond what Daniel's salary could support: vacations, new cars, private schools, while taking my grocery money. Richard smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We can certainly investigate. For someone of your newfound net worth, I'd recommend a comprehensive asset protection strategy anyway. Part of that includes understanding any potential claims against your estate." Within a week, the private investigator's report arrived. I sat in my new penthouse, reading it with growing anger. Daniel's salary, $95,000 annually, comfortable but not luxurious. Yet somehow, they'd managed. Annual trips to Hawaii and Mexico, 2 luxury vehicles purchased in the last 3 years, private school tuition for Emma, a secret investment account worth over $200,000. "How?" I asked Richard over the phone. Your contributions freed up their income for discretionary spending, he explained. Every dollar you spent on groceries, utilities, and childcare was a dollar they could invest or spend elsewhere. They've been building wealth on your back. The investigation revealed more. Vanessa's social media, which I'd never seen, painted a picture of affluent success. Designer handbags, spa days, photos captioned "blessed to live our best life" and "working hard pays off." One post from last month made my blood boil, teaching my children that success comes from smart choices and hard work, not handouts, while cashing my Social Security checks. There's something else. Richard said during our next meeting, "The house deed, you mentioned contributing to the down payment?" $70,000, most of my condo sale proceeds. Without documentation, that's considered a gift legally. However, he slid a paper across the desk. This is interesting. They refinanced 2 years ago, pulling out significant equity, $150,000. They never mentioned that. The money went to Vanessa's account. She used it to pay off student loans and invest the remainder. Your initial investment essentially allowed them to leverage the property for their own gain. I thought of all the times Vanessa had complained about money, suggesting I should contribute more for the household, all while sitting on hidden investments funded by my sacrifice. The next phase of my plan required delicacy. I hired an event planner, Catherine Westbrook, who specialized in high society gatherings. "I want to host a celebration," I told her. "A housewarming for my new penthouse, but I want it to be significant." Catherine understood immediately. In her world, significant meant unmistakably expensive. Guest list? About 50 people, including my son and daughter-in-law's entire social circle. Their neighbors, colleagues, Emma's school parents, everyone they've been impressing with their success. She raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Professional discretion. The investigator had been thorough. I had names, addresses, social connections, people who knew Daniel and Vanessa as the successful young couple with the lovely home and perfect life. People who had no idea their lifestyle was built on the bones of my sacrifice. "I want the invitation to be memorable," I continued. "Something that makes it clear this is a high-end event. Engraved invitations? Letterpress, perhaps? Perfect. And the date. 3 weeks should give us time for proper preparation. 3 weeks to plan the exposure of 8 years of deception. 3 weeks to prepare the truth." I hired a second investigator to document everything meticulously. Every payment I'd made, every contribution, every sacrifice, bank records, receipts, even photos of myself doing childcare while they vacationed. The file grew thick with evidence, but the masterpiece was the video compilation. The investigator had found security footage from various locations: ATMs where I'd withdrawn my last dollars for groceries, jewelry stores where I'd sold my precious pieces, the closing documents from my condo sale, each clip time-stamped, each transaction traceable to Daniel and Vanessa's benefit. "Why go to such lengths?" Thomas Morrison asked during one of our meetings. "You have more money than you could ever spend. Why not just move on?" I thought of standing in the rain, branded a parasite, of my granddaughter calling me mean grandma, of my son's silence while his wife dismantled my dignity. "Because money isn't the point," I said. "Truth is." The penthouse transformation was remarkable. What had been a beautiful but sterile space became a showcase of subtle wealth. Not ostentatious, but unmistakably expensive. The kind of understated elegance that whispered rather than shouted. 2 days before the party, I finally responded to Daniel's texts. Just one message: "I'm fine. Would love to see you and Vanessa," sending an invitation to a small gathering at my new place. "Please come." His response was immediate. "Mom, thank God. We've been so worried. Of course we'll come. The kids miss you." The kids who'd been taught to see me as a burden, the son who'd stood silent, the daughter-in-law who'd thrown me away like garbage. They thought they were coming to see a broken old woman ready to beg for forgiveness. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The evening of the party arrived crisp and clear. From my penthouse terrace, I watched the city lights twinkle like scattered diamonds. Caterers moved efficiently through my space, setting up stations of impossibly elegant food. Catherine had outdone herself. Everything screamed understated wealth, from the champagne fountains to the live jazz quartet. I chose my outfit carefully. Not the practical, worn clothes they'd last seen me in, but an elegant black dress that fit perfectly, paired with my grandmother's diamonds, pieces I'd hidden away rather than sell. My hair was professionally styled, makeup flawless. In the mirror stood a woman of substance. Not the dead-broke parasite Vanessa had scorned. The first guests arrived at 7. Judge Harrison and his wife from the country club Daniel aspired to join. The Montgomerys from Emma's private school. Vanessa's boss and his spouse. Each guest's eyes widened as they took in the penthouse. The view. The obvious wealth on display. "Martha, darling, you look wonderful," gushed Patricia Summers, whose daughter was in Emma's class. "We had no idea you'd moved to such a fabulous place." I smiled, playing the gracious hostess. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? By 7:30, the penthouse was buzzing with conversation. I'd strategically invited people who mattered in Daniel and Vanessa's social climbing world, people they'd tried so hard to impress, people who were now seeing me in a very different light. Then they arrived. I watched from across the room as Daniel and Vanessa entered. The transformation on their faces was almost comical. Confusion, shock, then a dawning horror as they recognized the other guests. Vanessa had dressed up, clearly expecting to patronize poor, displaced Martha in some shabby apartment. Instead, she found herself underdressed in a penthouse that made their suburban house look quaint. "Mom?" Daniel's voice cracked as he approached. "This place? How—" "Daniel, darling," I embraced him warmly, aware of our audience. "So glad you could make it. Vanessa, you look lovely as always." Vanessa's smile was frozen, her eyes darting around the room. "Martha, this is unexpected. Life is full of surprises." "Champagne!" They took glasses automatically, still processing. Around us, their social circle mingled, clearly impressed by my apparent wealth and sophistication. "How did you afford this?" Vanessa whispered, her mask slipping. "Oh, we'll get to that. First, enjoy the party. Mingle. Your boss is here. Vanessa. He was just telling me about the promotion you're hoping for." For an hour, I let them squirm, watched as they tried to reconcile the woman they'd thrown out with the elegant hostess commanding the room. Their friends and colleagues kept approaching me, complimenting the venue, asking about my story. I remained charmingly vague, building anticipation. At 8:30, I clinked a silver spoon against crystal. The room quieted. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my new beginning," I started, my voice clear and strong. "Many of you know me as Daniel's mother, the grandmother who was always picking up the children, attending school events, managing the household." Nods and smiles around the room. Vanessa's face had gone pale. What you might not know is that 3 weeks ago, I found myself suddenly displaced. After 8 years of living with my son and daughter-in-law, contributing everything I had to their household, I was informed my presence was no longer welcome. A ripple of surprise. Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, this isn't—" "Please, let me finish." My tone remained pleasant but firm. "You see, Vanessa here called me a dead-broke parasite. Those were her exact words as I stood in the rain, having been ejected from the home I helped purchase." Gasps. Vanessa's boss, Richard Carver, frowned deeply. The school parents exchanged shocked glances. "But here's the fascinating part," I continued, walking to the wall where Catherine had arranged a display. "My late husband, Harold, left me something I'd forgotten about, something Vanessa dismissed as worthless paper." I unveiled the framed original Amazon stock certificates. 5,000 shares purchased in 1998, additional purchases through 2000. Can anyone guess what those are worth today? Margaret Summers, who worked in finance, audibly gasped. "Those would be worth approximately $700 million. I finished calmly. The room erupted. Shock, disbelief, excited chatter. Daniel had gone white. Vanessa swayed on her feet. But that's not really why I invited you all here. I continued once the noise died down. Money is just money. I wanted to share some truth. The screen behind me lit up with the investigator's documentation. Over 8 years, I contributed over $300,000 to Daniel and Vanessa's household, my home sale, my savings, my Social Security. Here are the receipts. Click. Bank statements appeared. While taking my grocery money and claiming poverty, they managed luxury vacations. Click. Photos from Vanessa's social media. Hawaii, Mexico, wine country. While I sold my jewelry to pay for my grandchildren's needs, they accumulated secret investments. Click account statements. And my favorite, while calling me a burden who contributed nothing. Vanessa used the equity from the house I helped buy to pay off her student loans and invest the surplus. Click. Refinancing documents. The room had gone silent. Their friends, colleagues, and social contacts stared at the evidence of systematic financial exploitation of an elderly parent. But the real tragedy, I said, my voice dropping, is that I would have given it all freely, joyfully if they'd simply treated me with basic human dignity. Instead, I was erased, rewritten as a parasite, discarded once I'd been drained dry. Vanessa's boss looked disgusted. The school parents were whispering among themselves. Judge Harrison, whose mother lived with him, seemed personally offended. So yes, I concluded, raising my champagne glass, I'm celebrating tonight. Not my wealth, that's just Harold's vindication from beyond the grave. I'm celebrating truth and consequences. I looked directly at Daniel and Vanessa, who stood frozen like deer in headlights. To family, I toasted, my voice dripping irony, and to knowing exactly what it's worth. The silence that followed my toast was deafening. Then, like a dam breaking, the room erupted in whispers and shocked exchanges. But I wasn't finished. There's more, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. My attorney has prepared some documents I'd like to share. Richard Brennan stepped forward from where he'd been standing near the terrace doors. His presence, which I'd kept secret until now, added another layer of gravity to the moment. Mrs. Callahan has asked me to make several announcements, he said in his courtroom voice. First, regarding the property at 47 Maple Drive. Daniel flinched. That was their address. As Mrs. Callahan contributed $70,000 to the down payment without proper documentation. She has grounds to claim partial ownership. Will be filing for partition by sale unless an equitable arrangement can be reached. You can't do this, Vanessa burst out, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. That's our home. The home I paid for? I asked coolly. The home you refinanced behind my back to fund your investments? That home? Richard continued, unmoved by the interruption. Second, Mrs. Callahan has established the Martha Callahan Educational Trust for her grandchildren. This trust will provide for Emma and James's complete education through graduate school, if desired. A few guests nodded approvingly. Education trusts were common among the wealthy. However, Richard added, the trust has specific conditions. The funds can only be accessed directly by the educational institutions. No money will pass through the parents' hands. Additionally, the children must maintain regular contact with their grandmother to remain beneficiaries. You're trying to buy our children? Daniel finally found his voice, though it shook with emotion. Buy them? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm protecting their future from parents who would drain their grandmother dry and call her a parasite. The same parents who taught them to call me mean grandma to justify their cruelty. Patricia Summers gasped. They made the children call you that. I turned to address the room, but my eyes remained on Daniel. My son stood silent while his wife told me I was nothing, worthless, a burden. He watched as I was put out in the rain with nowhere to go. Not once did he defend the woman who raised him alone, who sacrificed everything for his success. Mom, please, Daniel begged. Can we discuss this privately? Privately? I shook my head. Like when you discussed throwing me out privately? When you and Vanessa privately decided I was disposable? No, Daniel, you made this public when you let her humiliate me, when you chose her narrative over the truth. Vanessa's boss, Richard Carver, cleared his throat. Vanessa, I think we need to discuss your judgment. This is deeply concerning behavior from someone we're considering for senior management. This is a family matter, Vanessa snapped, then seemed to realize her mistake. Snapping at her boss in public wasn't wise. Family? I pulled out my phone, scrolling to saved voicemails. Let me share what family sounds like. Vanessa's voice filled the room from a voicemail she'd left 2 weeks ago, thinking I'd never hear it. Martha's finally gone. Thank God, I swear. If I had to look at that pathetic face one more day. She actually believed we needed her, as if we couldn't hire real help if we wanted. At least now I don't have to pretend to be grateful for her existence. The recording ended. Several guests looked disgusted. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Robinson, shook her head in disapproval. But the grand finale, I announced, is this? Richard handed me a folder. Forensic accounting revealed something interesting. Over the past 8 years, while taking my money, Daniel and Vanessa claimed me as a dependent on their taxes. They received significant deductions and credits, none of which were shared with me. That's tax fraud, Margaret Summers said quietly, her finance background making the implications clear. Potentially, Richard agreed. We're exploring options with the IRS. Daniel stumbled to a chair, collapsing into it. Vanessa stood alone, her face cycling through emotions, rage, fear, disbelief. You vindictive bitch, she hissed, apparently forgetting our audience. Vindictive. I walked closer to her, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I was prepared to disappear quietly, to take my worthless papers and never bother you again, but you couldn't leave it at that. You had to grind my dignity into dust, call me a parasite, poison my grandchildren against me, erase my contributions, and paint yourself as the victim. I turned to the room at large. So yes, I'm vindictive. I'm showing everyone exactly who Vanessa and Daniel Callahan really are. Users, manipulators, elder abusers who smiled while robbing me blind. We'll sue, Vanessa threatened. Defamation, harassment, Richard smiled coldly. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and Mrs. Callahan has been very careful to document everything, including, I might add, recordings from the home security system you installed. Amazing what those cameras pick up. The final blow. Their own security system had captured years of verbal abuse, financial manipulation, and cruel treatment. Please, Daniel whispered, looking broken. Mom, please. The children will have everything they need through the trust. I finished. But you? You're facing the consequences of your choices. The house you can't afford without my contributions, the social standing you built on my sacrifices, the professional reputation now tainted by your treatment of family. I raised my glass one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. Daniel and Vanessa were just leaving. Security appeared at my subtle signal, another touch Catherine had suggested for handling potential disruptions. As they were escorted out, Vanessa turned for one last shot. You'll die alone. No one will love you for yourself. Just your money. I smiled serenely. Perhaps, but I'd rather die alone with dignity than live surrounded by parasites. Wouldn't you agree? The door closed behind them. The party resumed. Though the energy had shifted, people approached me throughout the evening, some offering support, others clearly reevaluating their relationships with Daniel and Vanessa. Judge Harrison pulled me aside. Martha, that took tremendous courage. If you need character witnesses for any legal proceedings, please call me. What they did to you, it's unconscionable. By 10 o'clock, the last guest had departed. I stood on my terrace, looking out at the glittering city. Below, somewhere in the darkness, my son and his wife were facing the wreckage of their carefully constructed life. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, accountants, and battles. But tonight I'd reclaimed my story. The dead broke parasite had revealed herself as the phoenix rising from the ashes of their betrayal. And I was just getting started. The morning light streaming through my penthouse windows found me at peace for the first time in years. The city below was waking up, and somewhere in it, Daniel and Vanessa were discovering that actions have consequences. My phone had been silent since last night. No more desperate texts, No more angry voicemails. They'd finally understood that the woman they'd discarded had teeth. Richard Brennan called it 9 sharp. The response has been swift. Vanessa's company has placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation into conduct unbecoming. Apparently, several board members were at your party. And Daniel? Your son left 17 voicemails at my office overnight. He's desperate to negotiate. He's realized they can't afford the mortgage without your contributions, especially if we pursue the partition sale. I sipped my coffee. Real coffee. Not the cheap brand I'd bought to stretch my budget while living with them. What does he want? To keep the house. He's offering to repay everything you contributed, with interest over time. With what money? Exactly my question. They're over-leveraged. Martha, the cars, the private school, the lifestyle. It was all built on the foundation of your sacrifice. Without it, the house of cards collapses. By noon, the social media fallout had begun. Vanessa's carefully curated image was crumbling. Someone who'd attended the party had posted about it, and the story was spreading through their social circle like wildfire. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, and karma featured prominently in the comments. Patricia Summers called personally. Martha, I wanted you to know, we've had a parents' meeting. Several of us are concerned about Vanessa being on the school board given what we learned last night. A woman who could treat family that way shouldn't be making decisions about children's education. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd anticipated. At 2 p.m, my doorman announced visitors. Emma and James, accompanied by a nervous-looking babysitter. "Grandma!" James ran to me, wrapping his small arms around my legs. "Where have you been? Mommy said you went away because you didn't love us anymore." My heart broke and mended simultaneously. "Oh, sweetheart, Grandma loves you more than all the stars in the sky. I never stopped loving you." Emma hung back, uncertain, at 10. She understood more. "Mom says you're trying to take our house." I knelt to her level. "Your house is safe, Emma. But sometimes adults make mistakes, and they have to fix them. That's all that's happening. Are you really rich now?" she asked with a child's directness. "I am. And do you know what that means? You and James will never have to worry about college. You can become whatever you dream of being." "Even a doctor?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Even a doctor, or an artist, or a teacher. Whatever makes your heart happy." The babysitter, a teenager I didn't recognize, shifted nervously. "Mrs. Callahan said I should only stay 5 minutes. Tell Mrs. Callahan the children are safe with their grandmother. I'll have my driver take them home in an hour." After they left, clutching new books from the museum gift shop and promises of regular visits, I felt the first crack in my armor. Whatever happened with Daniel and Vanessa, the children were innocent. The final call came at 6 that evening. Daniel, without Vanessa. "Mom?" His voice was hollow. "Can I come up, please? I met him in the lobby. My son looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usual confident posture gone. Vanessa left," he said without preamble. "Took her car, her jewelry, emptied the investment account, said she wasn't going down with the ship." I felt no surprise. Rats always fled sinking vessels. "I'm sorry," he continued, the words tumbling out. "God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I let her convince me you were the problem. I stood there like a coward while she destroyed you. I chose her over the woman who gave me everything." "Yes," I said simply. "You did. I destroyed everything, didn't I? My family, my children's grandmother, my own mother. For what? For a woman who ran the second things got hard? The question," I said carefully, "is what you do now." He looked up, a spark of hope in his eyes. "I'm not your safety net anymore. Daniel. The trust for the children stands. The legal proceedings regarding the house will continue. You'll need to figure out your own path forward." "I understand," he whispered. I wanted you to know. You weren't a burden. You were never a burden. You were the glue holding us together, and I was too blind to see it." I touched his cheek gently. "I know, but knowing and acting are different things. You'll need to prove you've learned this lesson." He nodded, tears streaming. "I love you. Mom, I love you too. Daniel, I always have. But love without respect is meaningless. Earn back the respect. As he walked away, shoulders bowed but steps determined, I felt the last of my anger drain away. Justice had been served, the truth had been revealed, the dead broke parasite had transformed into the architect of their downfall. Back in my penthouse, I raised a glass of Harold's favorite whiskey to the sunset. You were right to believe, my love. I whispered to his memory about Amazon, about investments, about everything. But most of all, you were right when you told me I was stronger than I knew. The city lights began to twinkle as darkness fell. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was running from the consequences of her cruelty. Daniel was facing the ruins of his choices. The children were learning that their grandmother was both powerful and loving. And me, I was finally, truly free. Not because of the money, though that certainly helped, but because I'd refused to accept their narrative. I'd refused to disappear quietly into poverty and shame. I was Martha Callahan. Mother, grandmother, survivor, and anyone who called me a parasite would learn exactly how wrong they were. The dead broke days were over. The best chapters of my life were just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're hearing this. Please comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Martha's situation? I'm eager to hear your perspectives.